within the window that's still open, we're hoping that we will find a way to settle this matter. So intensive negotiations are now underway.
I think it'll have specific impacts in particular areas, like the citrus industry could be decimated, whole communities could be wiped out. So it's really frightening.
It is imperative for our continent to stand up and start depending on themselves. There's something we have they don't have.
Well, it's going to affect our economy adversely, very badly, and it can only get worse from west to west, particularly given the fact that South Africa is the most unequal society in the world.
To tariff or not to tariff, but more importantly, how does it affect you and your family? It's topical, and it starts right now. A very good evening to you, South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience with us tonight. They'll pop up on your screen in a short while. We'll get some of their questions, their burning questions for our guests in a short while. The big T word, tariffs, imposed by the United States, not only on South Africa, but also on a significant number of trade partners. It's set to come into effect this week. So government said it will continue negotiating with the US regarding the 30% tariffs. That basically means that all channels of communication remain open. But what happens in the interim? If these tariffs go ahead, will there be support for companies? We're told the answer is yes. Good. What support though? Government was finalizing a package for companies that are vulnerable to the reciprocal tariffs. We're told details of these measures will be announced in due course. An export support desk to provide updates on developments and provide advisory services to exporters has been established. The bottom line is we need to keep people working, right? Companies need to continue to producing products. And we are dealing with a whole range of industries here. Citrus to automotive components. South Africa is also a major exporter of macadamia nuts to the United States. So varied industries, and impact might be different. How do we mitigate? How best do we plan for the worst case scenario, right? What more can be done to safeguard this country's national interests? We will discuss. Leads us to the question of the week, and we're asking you, what are your thoughts on the potential impact of the US's 30% tariff on South African exports? And do you believe a deal can be struck within the new 7-day deadline? Let us know at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up. All right, it's all about you, the impact on you, South African citizens. Our regular word on the street feature. We took the streets of Cape Town as well as Gqeberha, seeking diverse insights and perspectives on this topic. That will be a little later on the show. But first, I want to hear from the people of Johannesburg. This is what they had to say. Take a look.
I think it'll have specific impacts in particular areas, like the citrus industry could be decimated, whole communities could be wiped out. So it's really frightening. For the rest of the economy, I think we're a resilient nation. We'll get through it. We'll find other markets, and I think, we'll tackle it as we always do, with courage.
I think it's quite ridiculous that America thinks so superior of themselves, that they think so low of our continent. And I think it is imperative for our continent to stand up and start depending on themselves. There's something we have they don't have. Clearly they have what we don't have too. So it's an interaction. It's not like we're asking for help. It's a trade relationship.
Well, it's going to affect our economy adversely, very badly, and it can only get worse from west to west, particularly given the fact that South Africa is the most unequal society in the world economically, highest employment rate, with the plus 7 million unemployed youth taking time bomb soon to explode.
For South Africa, we're going to have to find new partners in terms of trade. Already in the automotive, cars are already expensive for us.
Possibly domestic, it would work. It would be nice for us to, we'll have lower interest rates. But on the international front, I think it's bad because look, our end is not the strongest, and looking over the 30 years, it's just been going down.
Not a good idea, and I think Donald Trump is a very, very bad man, and he needs to relook at the entire thing.
Right, so we are also learning that all applicable exemptions published in the previous US executive order are set to remain in force. And these exemptions cover products such as copper, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, lumber articles, certain critical minerals, stainless steel, scrap, and also energy as well as energy products. Now, let's tee up the discussion for you, what we know and why it matters. Kailihle Khumalo is SABC News international reporter. Thank you so much for joining us. We're also joined by our Lesotho correspondent, Rapelang Khadebe, for a perspective from that part of the world. Rapelang, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm going to come to you in a short while. Let's talk about the tariffs being imposed on not only South Africa, as we keep on mentioning, but a number of countries, right? We picked South Africa, Lesotho, Eswatini. It ranges from about 10% in terms of worldwide to over 40%. What stands out for you? What sort of deals are in play?
Well, certainly, Blaine, quite really far-reaching implications. As we know that South Africa really has been seized with this issue, negotiating with the US, trying to get a deal, especially because we know that at stake also is the AGOA question. We know that it's due for renewal come September, and at this point in time, it's been nullified. So quite a very important time as well, especially because these are very sweeping tariffs affecting so many sectors. I mean, for example, we have Lesotho here, where the textile really is really at the coalface of the country's economy, but also we saw the Prime Minister declaring that state of emergency, but also even Eswatini itself. I mean, we know that they are talking about that deportation deal where you had those 5 hardened criminals being taken to Eswatini as well. But for South Africa, Blaine, a very tough situation. We know that this has been preceded by very frosty ties between Pretoria and Washington, DC.
Rapelang, let's bring you into the conversation. It's a time of uncertainty, I guess, for Lesotho, especially as Kaya has mentioned, the textile industry. This uncertainty, what sort of impact has it already had in the industry?
Yeah, it is not a merciful exercise. The people who are working in the industrial firms, it hits them immediately. They were given 3 months to vacate or to stay at home when the owners of the industry are trying to find whether they can put the orders on, whether they can start deploying the orders. But until now, you can feel it's when it's month end in Maseru, you see the bars, the movement, mostly from people who are in the industrial area. Right now, the situation is just not good, and you can tell that it is the direct impact. I mean, we were hit with 50%, and there was no explanation as to how it was calculated. Nobody knew, and all of a sudden it is now down to 15%, and there's still no explanation as to how that was reached. So it's just a confusion. But if you look at what I think Lesotho is trying to do to explore the local market, it said South Africa is our immediate market. We can move into Africa trade. If we just can follow that pattern, maybe we need to get out of our senses and move out of the US market. It has proved unreliable. It is proving that things can only get worse from now on, because even those who have the deal, they are not sure whether it is the deal that will hold.
Yeah. So Is that the approach from the Lesotho government? Is there a thinking of a complete shift, a complete trade shift entirely?
You're absolutely right, because when Botswana president visited Lesotho in the past 2 weeks, he really visited one of the industrial areas because he wanted to replicate what was happening. He said, if you have a firm that can immediately absorb up to 2,000 people, I think this is the model that we need to know. I mean, Lesotho has got a long experience in the ability to really push those orders, big orders. And he said, if you just look at the market, with only, I think they were saying 3 companies with their orders, they said they were able to stay afloat, and said it's now, I think, now time to push and say, if I am best in what I do, I think let us not try and compete for markets. Let me do what I can do. Let Botswana do what it can do. And we have big enough market of things that we order from outside. Let us start looking from within.
Kai, what about the BRICS countries? We know that US President Donald Trump has repeated his threats with regard to slapping BRICS countries with this 10% tariff. Talk to us, and we know that BRICS is trying to fashion itself as a haven for multilateral diplomacy, right? But to what extent is this a threat to the United States, and in particular, US President Donald Trump?
I think there's a very clear understanding from President Trump that this is a very influential bloc in terms of these economies, very influential. But also their very recent summit in Brazil, they were very scathing with the policies of the US, with the Trump, the unilateral approach to it without any consultation. And also I think there's a very clear understanding that this is a bloc that is putting very concerted efforts in reshaping the global world order. But also in the main, we know that, for example, these are very powerful countries. But also, for example, when you look at India, this is the US's reliable partner, so to speak. But it was slapped with a 25%. But also, we know that with Russia, it's a very complex situation, Blaine, with the sanctions from the EU bloc. But also, now you have this particular situation as well. But it's a very interesting country, Blaine, must be Brazil. We know that currently there is a trial of former President Jair Bolsonaro, so that's Trump's friend. So that's why Brazil is also paying the price. But it's a very, very interesting scenario in this regard.
Raphael, I wonder, and it all boils down to people and livelihoods. And I wonder what's been the reaction from the ordinary worker in Lesotho. Of course, anxiety at this stage. But how are they fashioning it in terms of taking it in their strides? What's plan B?
Yeah, I think to ordinary, these are, allow me to call them the poorest of the poorest. This is the lowest income market, but very powerful because it's able to absorb huge numbers of people. So it does a huge dent when it comes to the impact on unemployment rate. And you can see the devastation. These are people who already live from hand to mouth. And when they are hit, now the reality is hitting in. Lesotho has been enjoying the 0 tariffs for quite a long time through the AGOA. And even one of the biggest one, which was the MCA, which was bringing about 5 billion, has been also wiped off. So the impact is going to be even worse. Lesotho government, I don't think they know what they're doing because it's just reaction from, and there's not even power to negotiate. It's just very tiny. They can't offer anything. Even if they offer the whole Lesotho, I don't think Trump would be interested. So it's quite huge of an impact. So we are yet to see the devastation that will come. We just hope, I think, the SACU, one of the oldest, I mean, if it negotiates, I think as a bloc, which includes South Africa, perhaps it could start to make a dent or a difference. But Lesotho trying to go all alone, I don't think they stand a chance.
Yeah. Look, it's difficult, especially when the world gets closer regarding the issues of globalization, etc. I wonder, Kaya, we were told by Minister Parks-Tal that they presented an offer to the United States. They were told to revise their offer. What are we currently dealing with in terms of where are the avenues of opportunity for South Africa here in terms of collaboration?
Well, certainly, Blaine, we know that with energy, it's a very primary issue. So South Africa, for example, is talking about getting gas from the US. We know that it's quite a very essential commodity, but also in terms of making sure that they allow the poultry from the US to come to South Africa. But also, most importantly, we know that another issue is around the precious minerals that we have here in South Africa. And in fact, also the South African government is emphasizing the issue of not really relying so much on raw materials, but making sure that it's value-added goods. But also, most importantly, we know that it's about making sure that they really push those investments as well, but supporting the agricultural sector as well, and really making sure that they do away with all sorts of impediments.
Yeah, and all of this that are listed here needs to be mutually beneficial, right? So South Africa will really be thinking about the detail of these deals. Now, what sort of issues can we expect coming out? Consequence, various scenarios being played out. And I guess that's government's job now, is to try and work out a solution for each kind of scenario. Best case, worst case. What sort of support is being offered?
Well, there's an assurance from the South African government that, especially for those sectors that will really just be severely affected, there'll be a mechanism of making sure that they sort of like lessen the burden. But in terms of the details, really, it's not quite clear. It's quite so opaque as to really how they're going to do that, especially because another issue that they raise, Blaine, is that diversifying also just in terms of the markets is going to be a very core issue here, where, for example, they count on their global alliances through the BRICS and many other, just global alliances that they have, but also even intra-Africa trade is a very key instrument as well, where they look at the issue of the continental free trade area where they're able to trade amongst the African countries.
Rapeleng, what's your country doing in order to ameliorate the situation?
Indeed, like he says, I think diversifying is a key at this point. Starting to appreciate the neighbors that you have, sustainable SADC and African Union as a whole. I think this is where we need to focus. But there's one thing I think also I want to call it a solace, is that Trump can only be here for 4 years. So sometimes we also don't need to totally go and devastate and kick everything simply because we are trying to respond to the current situation. I don't think what he's doing is sustainable, but there's a great lesson that we are learning, is that we can never depend on somebody else for our own welfare. So we need to diversify. We need to have new friends. We really need to stick together, I think, as BRICS, because it looks like BRICS is making a dent. That is why there's such a panic around the world. So I think this is the best time now to actually say we need an alternative. We don't need a dictator. We don't need somebody who can say he's the police of the world.
Rapeleng, thank you very much indeed. Context, always important. Kailihle Kumalo is SABC News, is international reporter. Rapeleng Khadebe is our Lesotho correspondent. Many thanks to both of them. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get perspective from the better minds in terms of problems, but also more importantly, solutions. What can be done? What measures needs to be put in place in order to ameliorate the situation, in order to get it better, to help South African companies as well? More next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical, a question of the week, and we ask you, what's your reaction basically to the 30% US tariffs on SA exports that's likely to be implemented this week? And do you believe that a deal can be still struck within the new 7-day deadline? Let us know at SABC News_TV. To help us understand this issue better, in studio we have Meluleki Nzimande, partner at Webber Wentzel, as a partner in the competition, trade and investment practice. He also specializes in international trade and investment law across a range of sectors. Joining us virtually is political economist Bongani Mahlangu, as well as Cobus, the founder and managing director of Macadamia Services Management, alongside our digital audience. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for joining us. Mr. Nzimande, maybe I can start with you. We heard from the Minister, Parks Tau, saying that they had to revise their offer. But at this late hour, are you confident we can get something out of it? Are you confident a deal can be struck?
Good evening, Blaine, and thank you for the opportunity. I am optimistic, maybe because it's my nature to be optimistic. You know, when you are a legal practitioner, it's not unusual to conclude a deal with the other side on the steps of the court,
right?
At the very last minute. So, and if you look at the president of the US, Mr. Trump, President Trump, his negotiating tactics also involve pressure cooker tactics. So, you should take it all in your stride, keep calm.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that our Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition remains calm.
Right. There's also a legal challenge back in the United States involving small business there, whereby questioning whether the US president should have gone via Congress to get this done. But as you say, there's different tactics here at play and not necessarily following the letter of the law. But is there hope in terms of something like that preventing these tariffs from going ahead?
Litigation is unpredictable at the best of times. That said, the power that resides in the state president is power that is legislated for by the lawmakers, and the lawmakers sit in Congress. There is an ongoing debate about whether President Trump is acting is acting from a safe harbor, so to speak, in terms of what he's doing. Part of the rationale that Mr. Trump is using is that it's an economic emergency that is informing his actions.
Yeah.
That emergency manifests in deindustrialization of the US, substantial deindustrialization. And what, at least at the beginning, it seems he was doing was to create barriers to, one, entice manufacturers to set up in the US knowing that they are protected from external competition, but two, revive the existing industries in the US so that they're not under pressure from imported goods.
Yeah.
So the question is, will that argument hold in the US courts? To say, will the economic emergency argument hold in the US courts? It's hard to predict. I should maybe reveal some of my sentiments here. South Africa has deindustrialized as well substantially. Manufacturing used to account for, to account for more than 18% of GDP. We are now down to 13 or so percent.
Right.
And we can see the consequences because we've got one of the highest unemployment rates in the world.
Yes.
So I can understand in some way what President Trump is trying to do.
Right.
My suspicion, though, is that the horse, I think, has bolted for the US.
Look, the America First approach, Cobus, has consequences. And I want you to pull back the curtain for us a bit and give us the reality on the ground. South Africa exports niche products, and one of the products, such an example of that, is macadamia nuts. Talk to us about, if these tariffs go through at 30%, what's the net result on the ground? Cobus, I'm not sure if it's just me. If you can unmute. Let's try that one more time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
All right, 100%. Yeah, it would be something very hard to swallow and digest because it's a very big portion of the market, and it's absolutely a lose-lose situation. for both sides of the trade, for both America and South Africa. I think if I can express it in values, I think America would probably be the biggest loser in these terms, in terms of the importers, because 31% of our kernel produce go towards the United States. We've got homes for 70% of the kernel elsewhere, whereas the importers, get 52% of their kernel from South Africa. So it would be a very big blow to them, as well, to have this impact on 50% of the produce that they import, to have those big tariffs. And one must remember that all the agreements over the years have been fostered through, relations over a long time. So it's not something that you can easily replace. And as I say, probably the American importers are going to be the biggest losers in this case. But it doesn't take away that it would affect South Africa very adversely if 30% of our kernel market have their tariffs and to find new homes for it. So I think we're a very good case, for exemption for tariffs from America's point of view, because they're the biggest losers. But we will feel that impact. And
to what extent will we be feeling that impact, Cobus? Give us a sense of how many people are employed in this sector, and are jobs at stake here?
Yeah, now there's a lot of jobs at stake, because we've got an alternative. More than half of our product goes out as primary raw produce to China, and that's really a very easy channel to follow. To export it as raw produce, but it creates other problems, because you export all your value, and you lose a lot of job opportunities, and you export your value, which means you lose everything that we could have created here in South Africa, and find new markets for it. And also it makes the market extremely concentrated, which means that we lose a lot of power and control over that market, that puts us at the mercy of other powers, and then they can enforce prices on us, and that will all, it all goes to the farmer and to the farm workers. But especially in our processing industry, we can't afford to lose that segment of the market and to export our value elsewhere.
Right. So, Bongani, Mahlangu, there's real consequences here, as you heard from Cobus. Government is working on various scenarios in order to try to stay ahead of the game. But what should be mainly part of their calculus going into these negotiations?
No, thanks. Greetings to you, our colleague in studio, and colleagues online. So it's quite difficult here, and I think it's the elephant in the room that we are not touching. That part of the issues here are less about economics, are less about trade, are less about finances and trade laws, but they're more about politics. You would have heard the president of the US repeatedly at any and every opportunity that he has been given. He has been raising the issue of South Africa taking Israel to the International Criminal Court, raising the issue of our domestic policies like the BEE that it does not agree with, raising the issue of South Africa's participation, particularly and generally the issue of BRICS and what that implies in terms of de-dollarization and trying to destabilize the US market. And also a lot of other issues as well. We don't even have an ambassador in that country for that matter. We have an envoy. I'm not sure even if the envoy has concluded his objectives, because an envoy is not like an ambassador. So now, if you had to then consider all of that, that would be more of the significant determinants with regards to the 30% that has been sustained since Liberation Day tariffs, whereas there would have been some downward adjustment.
Bongani, how much so? Because I was listening to Minister Pakstow, and he said when they are engaging with their trade counterparts in the United States, the issues of BEE and other issues don't necessarily come up. I guess it's more at a political level. So how do you kind of weigh weigh up the need to appease on a political level versus a trade level?
The same delegation team or negotiation team of South Africa also said that when they negotiate with their counterparts in trade from the US, they find each other. But the very same counterparts tell them that as so much as we agree at this level, we do not know and are unsure what will happen at the political level. And what we see right now are issues of the political level and not issues of the economic level. Because if it were just economic issues, it should have been concluded a long time ago. Remember the mandate that was given to US diplomats in Africa that conclude deals, economic and trade deals, trade not aid. That was the mandate they were given. So why should it then be difficult to conclude a deal with one of the biggest and most significant markets on the African continent if the mandate is trade not aid? Yeah. So you can then tell that the issues are less economic but more political.
Yes, good point. Let's hear from our digital audience. Kustas, let's hear from you first of all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Blaine, and good evening to our guests and colleagues, and of course at home. Blaine, you know, with each and every time I go to a vote, whether it's an election, my heart grieves because it looks like I'm voting for someone to lose their job tomorrow. Because each and every time we vote, it looks like a lot of people are willing to lose our jobs. Now, let's come back to this matter. I do not believe the South African government has done enough, Blaine. But for me, it's what they are sacrificing to try to appease the American that hurts me the most. We are sacrificing our own industrialization. For instance, the chicken is now being sacrificed. Mind you, the chicken imports are already at 70,000 tons. We are still putting them to say, look, let's accept more chicken. Are we not chasing jobs in South Africa by appeasing the Americans? Then there's gas, Blaine. We want to go buy gas into billions of dollars. What about our own gas supply where we could create our own jobs? So it grieves me to say that the more we vote for this ANC government, whoever votes, whoever it is, we continue to lose jobs, business continue to close, and it's just an unending cycle. So I'm very unhappy right now. I don't think South Africa has done enough. Let's not sacrifice our chicken industry. We are sacrificing gas. You know, we're not even building a single thing.
Right.
It's just disappointing. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Let me bring in Mr. Nzimande to respond to that. Look, seemingly government is stuck between a rock and a hard place. There needs to be a collaboration with the United States because they are one of the world's biggest consumers, right? But how do you do that without sacrificing your national interests? How do you effectively negotiate? Does normal diplomacy work in a situation like this?
It's difficult. What President Trump has introduced into trade negotiations are geopolitical arguments. Someone has mentioned BRICS. So it makes it a bit complex, but not insurmountable. There are countries that have worked on their relationship with the US who have managed to secure some deals. But what we should be looking at is winning ourselves of excessive exposure to foreign trade, to be quite honest. I mean, if you look at a country like India, India's economy is driven largely by domestic consumption. Part of what we should be doing as we grow the economy is to grow our ability to shift the needle economically through local consumpment, but we are also part of the African continent. Yes. So we've got markets just on our doorstep that we can increase. So maybe in closing, I just want to comment on what Costa said in relation to the chicken industry and other industries. It's always a fine line to tread. Our industrial and tariff policy seeks to not just protect, but also support competition. And we have always been able, part of the reason we enjoy a surplus in our trade with the US is that we are more competitive than the US, one. And two, our currency relative to the US is weaker. So those are some of the advantages that we have. And as I always say, the devil is in the detail. You look at the sector and assess the opportunities and assess the strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
It's dangerous to take a blanket approach.
Yes.
And by the way, government can only negotiate a framework. The people who are at the coalface are the businesses and, I dare say, the workers.
Yeah, that's an important point, Cobus, that we mustn't lose sight of the details, because each industry is specific, is it not? Whether there is even a market in terms of the alternative markets in that country. What about that country's stockpile? What about the issues of logistics? What about the consumer, etc., etc.? What sort of measures should be in the support package that government is working on, from your point of view?
Yeah, I think a lot can be done in terms of agricultural policy, looking just at how industries are structured, and to see if we can't have a more coordinated effort to deal with these things. So from a government point of view, I think there's place for intervention on a strategic level, on a structural level, so that we can have a more coordinated effort to deal with these things. But other than that, it's just a very hard place to be if you are very dependent on the market. A lot of the processing that you do, a lot of the kernel produce that you go to, you have to go to a specific market, and they do something like that. It just have an enormous impact on us on a practical level. That is very hard to assist in any way from government point of view, unless it's on a strategic, structural support level.
Right. Let's hear from a digital audience once again. Ntatua, let's hear from you. Your question. Oops, I can't hear you. If you can unmute, Ntatua.
You can hear me.
There we go. Go on.
Can you hear me? Yes. I would like to, isn't time that South Africa rethinks its international trade policies and actually reflect, because we have seen how these deals are used against South Africa. For example, in 2015, Obama actually used AGOA to actually force South Africa to actually import chicken into South Africa. So we see how it actually affects our self-determination as a country. Isn't it time for us to actually set the terms of the trade deals and make sure that we still have our independence as our country? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll come back to the answer in a short while. Moletelo, let's hear from you first.
Good evening, Blaine. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Blaine, can you? Yes. Blaine, I think I just want to start off by saying that this is bigger than just trade figures. It's a reminder that America is not a stable partner, and one election and they can weaponize your economy. Trump isn't negotiating with.
Oops, Moletelo, we lost you there. All right, we'll try and fix it up in a short while. Mr. Nzimande, maybe to Ntatua's question about South Africa using its leverage as well at this stage of the game in order to get a sweeter deal, so to speak. And for instance, there are many other countries who are affected by these tariffs who will be coming to South Africa to say, hey, do you have space for our products? So how do we use that leverage at this stage to get a better deal?
In your intro earlier on, you mentioned that our minerals to the US are exempted from the duties. The reason they're exempted is because the US needs them. And the US companies will be competitive using them in the absence of duties. We as South Africa have got an instrument in our arsenal, which is an export tax. It's currently in place, for instance, in relation to exports of scrap metal.
Right.
We can consider using that instrument in the context of our minerals. But that's not a decision you make lightly.
Yes.
ultimately, when, and I've got sympathy for the Macadamia people because they are weighted heavily towards the American market. Right. But when you look at the total percentage of our exports to the US relative to our global exports as South Africa, in 2024 they accounted for about 8%. And 2022 7 to 8%. So our exposure to the US market is not as high as it is to the African market, for instance. Our brothers on the continent, East Asia as well, or should I say Asia, and likewise Europe and the UK. Right. So when we react to the US, we shouldn't use a hammer to kill an ant. We should be nuanced, and I again must commend our negotiating team. Because they say we will continue to talk, because as I said, we can't afford to ignore the US. Right. By the way, the US is the biggest exporter of sophisticated technology on IT and chips. And for me, if we are already in that value chain. Yeah. But if you can grow on that value chain, that's an economy of the future. I'm not saying we should sacrifice macadamia or sacrifice chicken, but I'm saying when you are the state, you look at the total picture. Right. Yes. Right.
Let's hear what the people of Gqeberha as well as Cape Town have to say with regards to this. We took to the various streets of these various cities to get your take. It's important to listen to you. This is what you have to say.
From what I've seen in the past, generally when these tariffs do happen, there would be an increase on certain products within the stores that we buy. And at the moment, South Africa cannot afford that. Everyday citizens are struggling as it is. So a further increase, I hope it's not going to be detrimental to our lives.
I think it's going to affect the people who have the least and therefore increase our joblessness, increase youth joblessness as well, and I think it's going to lower the bread, the bread cutoff in terms of how much people actually live on per day.
The people that are working on the farms now, that means that that affects their jobs. Who are the people working on the farms? It's not the richest, huh? Exactly. So that's the knock-on effect that we will experience, and it will happen.
I have family that live in the Eastern Cape where the automobile industry is, and it's affecting that directly because everybody else makes the nuts and bolts to go in the car. They make the leather to go on the seats. So it's not just...
Thoughts on this matter. Bongani, let me bring you into the conversation. And look, the big word, the big D word is diversification, right? Looking for alternative markets. That's the advice out there. Africa being one of the areas that people are saying South Africa should be looking more into. But I was reading a opinion piece by Professor William Gomede today in the Sunday Times, and he argues that suggestions that South Africa can substitute US trade with African trade are misplaced. And he further says that African countries do not have the US's sophisticated consumer market, and they are hard to do business with because of chronic state failure, corruption, and instability, unquote. What's your reaction to a comment like that? Bongani, please unmute.
Africa continent.
Go on.
Okay, it was unmuted. Okay. That's just one of the solutions, leveraging on the Africa continental free trade area. There will be challenges, of course, like the ones highlighted in infrastructure, but that's just one. And it needs work, and it can work. I mean, if it did not work or would not work, then Trump would also not be interested in Africa, not be interested in countries such as Rwanda, the DRC, and everywhere else where he has deployed his diplomats to go and secure deals. So why is it when South Africa has to do the same, imagine now the likes of Prof. Gomet have to raise those issues, whereas the very same US is doing the same. But also, our government has been focused largely on export diversification and finding new markets. But there's one thing that they are not talking about the most, and I think even the guest they spoke about it, when it comes to domestic value creation. So when domestic value creation, multiple components under it. One is the beneficiation. The other is boosting domestic consumption. Boosting domestic consumption would also require an expansionary fiscal policy, an expansionary monetary policy. So you get more money in more people's hands, so they can then consume what the US will not consume. So they will consume the surplus domestically. And the likes of China would have also done the same. Another thing that we can bank on is that our value, our currency may depreciate further to the US currency, which makes our goods cheaper again. So that can offset, especially in the short run. But before I get off this one, I want to remind you of the Smoot-Holloway Act of 1930, when the US did what they are doing now, and it had consequences on them. So what we are seeing now in economic history, it's not the first time we are seeing. But what I want to urge is domestic consumption. This export-led growth strategy, we need to sometimes ease up on it. That's not the only way. We have so many people that are sitting at home. If they were employed, they would have money to spend. And it's that money they would be spending on our oranges, spending on our macadamia nuts. So we are always looking on the outsiders to solve our domestic issues. And that makes us vulnerable. So we need to de-risk. And that means then we need to start looking at what can we do within South Africa, and then also look into Africa. And if you look into Southern Africa, by the way, we are the #1 trading partner with most of Southern African countries. Yes. So to expand further to other corners of Africa would not be a new thing. So I'm not sure if Prof. Gomet is aware of that.
Let's get Moletelo into the conversation. Hopefully your line is cleared up. Let's get your question, your comment. Oops, we're not having like Moletelo. One last try. There we go. Third time's the charm.
Awesome. Blaine, we can't keep on relying on a country that is run by political and emotional decision making. That's why BRICS is an important partner, because it's helping us shape global trade and not just follow it. And it's where multipolarity is actually becoming real and not just a rhetoric. So if we're really being serious about development and countering these, this emotional response by Donald Trump, we need to start with regional manufacturing, as was mentioned, intra-Africa supply chains. And also, we need to really put our foot into BRICS and say, look, this is where we are and this is where we're standing. We can't keep on reacting to America's politics like we have no other options. We do, but we need to stop playing safe as a country. Yeah. And start making decisions, and tough decisions. Yes, it might hurt in the short term, but we need a long-term strategy, long-term policies that will actually be sustainable for our country. Because now, every time when we get attacked by tariffs, what then happens is that our economy starts falling back on its knees, where we shouldn't be begging all the time. We shouldn't be going out as beggars, because we need to be equal partners. And, Trump is not really teaching us a lesson out of goodwill, but we should still learn from it. Right. We need to learn to live without the US. This isolationism that he's doing, it's actually good for us. It's a time for us to now to reset, because we are at the crossroads as a country. We need to reset our economy and say, look, how can we diversify our economy so that we can know that should anything happen, with regards to anyone imposing tariffs on us, we have other partners that we can trade with. Right. And, we need to respect ourselves as a country.
Point taken.
Thank
you
so much.
Moletelo. Thank you. Cobus, maybe a possible solution would be government subsidizing certain industries. Should that be a route to take? I mean, it happens elsewhere in the world, China, Europe, etc. What about that as a solution?
Yeah, I think for a long time, the agricultural community felt that there's much more that can be done by government to not only protect our industry, but also to have incentives in place so that we can develop more and add more value. I think we would appreciate a more protectionist approach towards the agricultural sector. And I think a situation like this show up our vulnerability very clearly, and that we are a sector that must be looked after very well. So I think there's definitely certain areas in which they can assist us, and I think we must just be very careful for a simple substitution. If we just look, America always had a zero tariff on us, and China 12%. Now we've got a 30% tariff with America and a zero tariff, with China, and it can be a very easy outflow of raw produce from South Africa into a different market, but it's not protecting our value add, our job creation abilities in South Africa. So if they can carefully look at that, I think they can play a very positive role there.
And shifting markets, Mr. Nzimande, doesn't happen overnight. There's processes as well, right? There's certain issues that you need to iron out with certain, regions. The EU market, for instance, regarding citrus, they have an issue with our black citrus black spot issue. But I heard from Minister Tau again, is that they take these similar citruses from other countries as well. So those kind of disputes needs to be ironed out in order to, flesh out a new deal with alternative markets. It doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely. I should mention that there is an economic partnership agreement between the European Union and the Southern African Customs Union, of which South Africa is a part. There's also an economic partnership agreement between, again, SACU and the United Kingdom. So, and by the way, from a competitiveness point of view, South Africans are equally, if not more competitive than Europeans in terms of manufactured goods. And that is why our trade pattern, even with Europe and the UK, reflects that in terms of processed goods that we are exporting to those territories. So that is an opportunity as we speak. To the issue of standards, or non-tariff barriers, as they are commonly known, that's normal part of global trade. And by the way, we've got instruments, particularly within the Economic Partnership Agreement, which are there to deal with these disputes, whether it's through negotiation or it's through litigation. But that is normal. It happens. By the way, we've had similar problems with the US, and we've resolved them. So I wouldn't be too wary or too worried about those type of issues. What is critical is, for me, a business-to-business connections, because that's what creates a market. And once your product is in that market, the scope to grow. Yeah, maybe I should.
Time will tell. Three of the most loaded words in geopolitics. We shall see what happens. We've run out of time, but thank you very much indeed. Meluleki Nzimande, partner at Webber Wentzel. Cobus is the founder and managing director of Macadamia Services Management, as well as political economist Bongani Mahlangu, digital audience as well. Thank you so much indeed. Value added, no doubt. We'll be continuing with this conversation. SABC News will be fleshing out this throughout the week. We'll be focusing on this issue, but the main thing for us is how it affects the ordinary man and woman on the street, the livelihoods that are at stake. That's the important thing. Thank you so much indeed for adding value. Right, before we go, here's my take. A couple of key words in opening up the door to a more resilient economy. Diversification, big word. Alternative markets, spreading your reach, your interests across different asset classes, industries and geographic regions. Why? Well, for one, it will help reduce overall risk, right? But that doesn't happen overnight, as we've been talking about. It's a process. So how should South Africa factor in the United States approach of late as part of the larger trade calculus? What are the costs and what are the benefits? These need to be weighed soberly, with the major part of the calculus being national interest and the protection of livelihoods in this country. and that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of Topical on YouTube as well as SABC Plus. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Unwrap Africa up next with Tembekile. Until next week, my brothers and sisters. Take care. Bye-bye.